Okay, at this time, I'd like to call the Transportation Subcommittee of the Lowell City Council to order, June 25th, 2024. The clerk, please call the roll.
Councilor Dakota, Councilor Janess,
Here.
Councilor Noon,
Yep.
2 present.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Clerk. Today in the chamber with us, we have George Anastas, who's the Lowell Regional Transit Authority General Manager, and David Bradley, who's the Lowell Regional Transit Authority Administrator. And they're here to give us a little bit of an update as to what they're up to this year with the increased funding that's been made available through the Fair Share Amendment by the state. And just current status and where we're going. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Mr. Bradley.
I appreciate the invite very much to have the LRTA here tonight. You are right, the LRTA has received additional state funding, upwards of $4 million from the prior year. And with those dollars, those come directly from the Commonwealth. And not only do they come from the Commonwealth, but they come with a directive of things that they want to do with those funds. And, you know, their priorities, the governor's priorities, are address, you know, staffing and, you know, increased service, whether it be evenings or weekends. And also, they wanted to add daytime service. So the way that the LRTA approached these new dollars started essentially in fiscal '24, the year that we're finishing out right now. And our first priority was to build up our infrastructure, starting with staffing, to accommodate the plans that the governor had. And as of November 30th, 2023, the LRTA had 48 drivers for our fixed route system. And that was a direct result of COVID over the last few years and the general condition of the economy. So what we wanted to do is, and because we went from 60 drivers down to 48, the first goal of the LRTA was to rebuild that staff, rebuild the infrastructure so we could carry out the plans of the governor. So we did indeed do that. The first step of that was to renegotiate the union contracts with our two contractors, the ATU, which runs our fixed route system, and the Teamsters that runs the paratransit. And through those efforts, we went from 48 drivers on November 30th to 63 drivers today. So we are starting to work on what we're calling phase one of the implementation plan to add service. So the easy part is the hiring piece. It takes about 4 to 4.5 months of training for each driver as they come in. So we're currently working on training those drivers and getting them up to speed. The good news is that yesterday we started our updated service, and that included going from hourly service on 7 of our routes, 6 or 7?
Three routes, and in addition to that, we added 3 additional routes on Saturdays.
So we're
And other expanded service as well.
so our game plan was start with staffing, do whatever infrastructure upgrades we could do, and then take it to the next step. So we've accomplished the first phase. The second phase is getting the additional service. So as of June 24th, we went from hour service on the routes to half-hour service. And the other thing that George just alluded to, we had 3 combo routes that we had in the city, which were a combination of 2 routes. And we broke those routes up because we have the staffing now. And that gave us the opportunity to have go from 3 loop routes to 6 individual routes. And so now those 6 routes stand on their own. We feel that it's a much better service for our customer, and it's a lot easier for them to understand the route system now. So those are the first steps that were taken. What we plan to do as we increase our staffing is to add additional night service, which I know that you are a proponent to that. So that will be the next phase. And then eventually we'll be off to adding weekend service, specifically Sunday service.
Thank you. Sorry, just catching up with my notes here. That sounds great. Appreciate you being here and offering this update. Also like to note we're joined in the chambers by Councilor Eric Gitcher. Thanks for being here. At this point, I'll open it up. You have any questions?
Mr. Chairman, defer to, there's a couple of our guests here who want to maybe comment or suggestion. I let them talk first.
Okay, great. So if anybody would like to make a line at the podium, if you have some comments or questions, please feel free. Just state your name and address for the record.
Thanks, councilors. Thanks, everybody, for being here. Steve Malagodi, 200 Market Street in beautiful downtown Lowell, and representing 350 Mass of Greater Lowell. So it's Greater Lowell. We cover basically Lowell and the adjacent suburbs. So we have members from Tewksbury to Chelmsford, Westford, Bedford, et cetera. So Greater Lowell. At the last council meeting, where this issue was referred to the subcommittee, Councilor Dakota at the end asked if, what other questions were there to be asked. And we do have some specific questions that we've been posing to the council and since essentially last year. So we do have some specific questions. But I kind of thought it was important before we get there to try and clear up, or to say clearly, if we can, what our organization's interest in this is. 350 Mass is a statewide organization devoted to combating climate change. And so we work on energy policy and transportation policy and so forth. As such, we recognize the essential nature, the essential role that public transit has to play in the decarbonization of our economy in order to combat climate change. Some of you may know that transportation is the #1 contributor to greenhouse gases, followed closely by buildings. So transportation issues are really, really critical. Of that transportation sector contribution to greenhouse gases, heavy vehicles, such as transit buses, school buses, and of course, heavy freight, so semi-trucks, contribute a full, come in, Mr. Manager, contribute a full 20% of the greenhouse gases in the transportation sector to climate change. So that's why we're interested. Our sole interest, here is in the decarbonization issue. We have no interest whatsoever in micromanaging public transit agencies or criticizing how they do their job. We don't have the expertise for that. We do have a lot of expertise in the whole decarbonization issue. So we do have some questions that we've been trying to get answered. So there are only a couple. In fact, in the last couple of weeks, the LRTA has addressed a couple of them, namely service improvements. So we're really, really happy to see those. So you mentioned, Director Bradley, the funding increases from the state last year for the 23-24 budget. That 23-24 budget included a $54 million increase in funding statewide to the RTAs, up from $96 million, where it had been stuck for about a decade or longer. So that extra $54 million, for which some of us, including myself, lobbied very hard to get. So we were really, really happy that funding was increased. So of the $54 million, the distribution of those funds is kind of cloudy. We don't know how much each RTA got. So we were kind of curious as to how much of that increase of the $54 million came to the LRTA. So that was one of our questions. The other main question that we had was, and I know that the agenda item is about the increase in state funding, but in that same fiscal year, the LRTA specifically was, according to press reports, received around $7 million in federal funding, specifically for electrification and related activities. So we're kind of like curious as to how that $7 million was used. But more important than those specific numbers, what is we think is really needed, and not just for our satisfaction, but for the councilors, for the city of Lowell, and for all the municipalities, more important is what is the roadmap? What is the pathway that LRTA sees for the electrification of the fleet? So, for instance, in that $7 million grant, funding was earmarked for low or no emission vehicles, workforce development, and facilities adaptation toward electrification of the fleet. So we can't figure out what the future of Lowell is going to be if we don't know how we're going to address this issue. For instance, the Link project. Vast, I mean, that's a huge project. Public transit needs to be, integrated into that development. So how is that going to happen? So basically, what we're trying to figure out, or see if we can, from the LRTA, is what are the plans? What's the vision for, say, the next 5 years? The next 5 years, it's going to be 2030, and by 2030, we're going to be deep into the nuts and bolts of this energy transformation. So now is the time to figure out how we're going to get there. So basically, that's it. We'd kind of like to know how much did the LRTA get from the state, and what's the vision for the electrification of the fleet? Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. I know, Mr. Bradley, you did mention that figure. I think it was it 4 million? Is that what?
Yes, so the LRTA this past year,
I'm sorry, Councilor, it's really, really hard to hear back here, so if you've addressed these things, I'm sorry, I just couldn't hear it.
okay, I'm sorry about that. So the LRTA this past year received approximately $4.6 million of additional state funding for those initiatives that I spoke about earlier. And, so our approach with that money was to phase it in and be fiscally responsible with it and address the needs that we saw were first and foremost. And we could not add additional service unless we had staffing to do that. So that was our first approach, is to address that issue. And thankfully, we were successful with that. So the next step is, we outlined the next step for service. But beyond that, you asked a question about the $7 million that the LRTA received. So that $7 million was specific for capital, and it was for low or no emissions. And so we have not spent that money yet. We are spending it. Our buses have a 10 to 12 year service life. So we replace those buses as they come due. We replaced one hybrid electric vehicle this past year with a hybrid electric.
Is that diesel hybrid?
It's a diesel hybrid. And the next part that we're doing, we've got 6 more vehicles that need to be replaced in fiscal 26, so next year. So there's approximately 1 year lead time on that. So we're looking at ordering those vehicles right now. We have some challenges within the city with bridge height and weight restrictions. So currently, height and weight restrictions. So with the diesel buses, they're a certain height. They're able to go through the city without any issues on the bridges. There are a few bridges within the city that have a height restriction. So if we go to electric, or if we go hybrid, or even CNG, it adds at least a foot to the height of our vehicles. So if we do that, it's going to close us off from certain neighborhoods, as well as some of the restrictions on the bridges that go over some of the canals. I know that the city and the state have been working on repairing a lot of those, but at the same time, as we're replacing these vehicles, we have to be mindful that we're not shutting off neighborhoods. At this point in time, there are some small electrified vehicles that could go into these neighborhoods. But what we need to do is we need to find vehicles that handle our peak service. And our peak service is at the time that your schools are letting out. So when we're right-sizing these vehicles, or when we're trying to determine what vehicles we can purchase that suit height, weight, and environmental issues, it becomes very difficult to do it. We're not in an area that's flat, no bridges, no restrictions. So we're trying to work through that at the same time as addressing Steve's points. So that $7 million grant was, in that grant, we specified hybrid electrics to replace vehicles with hybrid electrics, knowing that to try to get to full electrification is going to take a lot of infrastructure upgrades that by fiscal 26, which is only 12 months away now, we don't have the time to get the grid infrastructure built up in our facility. At the same time, we are working with the Commonwealth of Mass through MassDOT, through Battery Electric Bus Initiative. So we are working with their consultants to see how we can phase that project and that program in here in the city of Lowell. The initial review that they did does not allow us to go 100% electric at this point in time.
Because of the infrastructure.
Because of the infrastructure issues. At the same time, sometimes you'll see buses that are driving around the city and you'll say, wow, there's not a lot of people in there. But there are a lot of kids on the buses at peak time. So we do have to maintain that, 30 to 35 foot bus size. And right now, the hybrid electrics and CNGs and the electric buses come through in 35-foot range. They don't come any smaller in length or height. So we're going to continue to have some of these issues unless we're able to work around the restrictions that we have. There is a plan for the LRTA in time to move forward to electric vehicles. The first step that we're taking is the hybrid step. We did purchase our first fully electric vehicle that is a Roadrunner size vehicle that we're piloting out in the town of Acton. And that vehicle will be going into service late August. And so that will be our first attempt at that. I want to see how that works out on those smaller vehicles. We're trying to take the proper approach. I know a lot of people want to rush into this, but there's a lot of capital money that's going to have to come into the LRTA to accomplish those goals. The buses in general, from a diesel bus to a fully electric bus, without talking about infrastructure or charging or safety issues, those vehicles are almost twice the cost of our diesel buses. The other thing that we've got to consider is range, because we've got vehicles that are going out to Littleton, to Burlington, and Bedford, and Andover. And the one thing that we have to do is make sure that the range is there, so these vehicles can not only get out there, but get back. At the same time, we're balancing, if we're replacing a diesel or a hybrid electric vehicle with a fully electric vehicle, how many of those vehicles do I need? Am I going to need two to accomplish the same amount of work that we're doing currently? Meaning in an 8-hour, 9-hour shift, am I going to need two buses to fulfill those routes that is currently being done by one vehicle. So as you can imagine, there's a lot to think about here. It's not only the LRTA that's going through it, but it's every other RTA that's trying to figure this out. And at the same time, there's going to be a build-out for infrastructure, that if we started it immediately today, you're talking that we're probably 28 months out from getting that system upgraded or our property upgraded with electrification. So there is a plan out there. You know, yes, it's been done behind closed doors because there's a lot of things that we're wrestling with. There's funding issues, there's range issues, there's restriction issues that we're dealing with. But the overall goal, and the safety issues. I've got concerns about safety on electric vehicles at this point in time. I've seen enough videos, you know, Connecticut is a prime example. They bought 12 new vehicles before they even went on the road. One caught fire, and you can't put these vehicles out. So there's some hurdles that we have to cross before we get to that point. Do we want to get there? Yes. We've got the same issues, you know, the same environmental issues that you have, Steve, and that the group has. But we're the ones responsible to get us there, and to do it, I want to do it properly. I don't want to rush into something, because you're right, it's not just the city of Lowell. It's every community. There's 14 communities that we serve. And this has to be the right decision for all of us. And, you know, so we ask that you bear with us as we, you know, go through this process, because it is a very important process that we're going through. And our goal essentially is to get to where you're thinking. But in the meantime, it's not just that we're looking at. We've got service that we have to put out on the street, and we've got a lot more plans as we go forward, whether it be evening or weekends.
Great, thank you. A lot of detail there. I really appreciate that. I think the biggest thing of having this meeting was to have these conversations, and so this is really good. And I'm really thankful that you guys are here to engage with us, and so we can all understand what's happening. I'd also like to mention we are joined on Zoom by Councilor Dakota, and joined in the chambers by Councilor Rita Mercier. I know my colleague Councilor Noon has some questions, so I will.
Thank you, Councilor Chanez. Thank you, Mr. Bradley and Mr. Anastas, for being here. You know, very happy to see that, you know, the increase in service in terms of daytime and, you know, the expansion of the route, and you're talking about weekend and holidays and stuff, which is very, very good, not just for Lowell resident, but also for the resident of other city and town that LRTA serve, right? So you also talk about, you know, build up the infrastructures, and you're talking about busing, and so you talk about step taken, and I think it's very detailing than the report provide. That last council meeting, this is very good conversation that you have. Resident ask question, and you certainly have some plan ahead in terms of what you do with all the federal, state, increase in state funding and federal. So I'm very happy to hear what you present tonight, and looking for, you know, a continue conversation as we, you know, move forward with, you know, serving our city, serving our, you know, what you do. I really thank you for being here. You know, if possible, I'm sure Mr. Chairman Dakota, he's on Zoom now, you know, to have you back and say 6 months or a year from now and say, you know, Mr. Bradley, where we at on it, you know, I mean, in terms of, you start already hybrid, you know, and you just mentioned the hybrid, when you're changing, replace bus that is outdated now, you know, you replace it with hybrid. The next step will be electric, and but you want to do it safely, right? You want to do that. Safety concern is paramount in terms of, you know, how the right infrastructure, the right training, the right everything to go move forward on this. So thank you again. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Councilor Noon. I know Councilor Dakota is waiting to join, so I'm going to go to him next. And then there's one more member of the public who'd like to speak. So, Councilor Dakota, floor is yours.
Thank you, Councilor. I'd like to thank Mr. Bradley and Mr. Anastas for their attendance. Mr. Bradley, you touched upon the hybrid and the grid infrastructure, and I've actually been in communications as the transportation director for the Lowell Public Schools with NRT, and they're in the process of doing that. It is a very daunting task for this infrastructure to get done. I'm sure we're probably a couple of years, 2 to 3 years before this is all settled. In talks that I've had with other transportation directors in the state, they're also looking at an alternative of, I apologize, of propane gas buses. Has that come across the table for discussion with LRTA?
The LRTA is looking at other alternatives beyond straight electric. And there are a couple fuel cell alternatives out there that we are looking into at this point in time. At one point, the LRTA had some gas vehicles. They were CNG vehicles. And when we had those vehicles, we only had 6 of those in our fleet. Again, the gas is stored at on the roof of the vehicles, so we were only able to use those on certain routes. As we go forward, we will look at propane as well, but the fuel cell is one that's been getting a lot of attention lately as well. And there are similar issues that full electric have, but to refuel those vehicles is a lot faster than an electric vehicle, and the infrastructure required to use a fuel cell is not as costly as the infrastructure build out that we would need for electric. So we are looking at a couple different options at this point in time.
I'm glad to hear that. Question, are we still on track with the new bus tracker for next month?
So I'll leave that, so George Anastas, who's our general manager for our fixed route fleet, I'll have George answer that question.
I'll put you on the spot, George.
Thank you. We are on schedule for the LRTA bus tracker. July 15th is the launch date to the public. So we will have the system on your computer, or it can go on smartphones. So all of that is being set up, and we're on schedule. We're probably going to have a soft rollout ahead of time to make sure it works properly, but everything is going fine with that. And by the way, everyone in the packet I'm handing out, we have a flyer on that giving the details on how it works.
Thank you.
Yep.
One final question for Mr. Bradley. Mr. Bradley, in a memo that was in our packet last week from Assistant City Manager Machado to City Manager Golden, there was a report from you concerning the expected funding increases from the state will allow the LRTA to implement service improvements over the next few fiscal years, contingent on sustained funding levels beyond FY 2025. Do you foresee any glitches in that funding, or is that pretty well assumed that the money will be there?
Well, the good news is that the funding level that we had in fiscal '24 has been carried level funded, at least level funded into '25. So that's a good first step. I've been at the authority for almost 30 years now, and there's been some years that the state contract assistance, the operating assistance that comes from the state, went backwards. So this was a big jump, and I'm hoping, I'm excited to see this type of jump for service. But I'm always a little apprehensive until you get 2 or 3 years of consistent funding that it will be there for the long run. But I am hopeful. I just wanted to put that in as a caution, that's all.
Yep. Gentlemen, appreciate your time. Thank you. Thank you, Councilor Janice.
Thank you, Councilor Dakota. Feel better. Steve, something
Can I
quick?
just, about the funding for the next fiscal year, the House has called for 165 million, which is great. The Senate has called for 214, so they'll come together somewhere, in the reconciliation process. So we're really, really happy that our lobbying efforts are beginning to bear fruit. We worked really hard lobbying for this funding increase. Quite frankly, when I first found out that the statewide budget for for RTA, regional RTAs was 94 million, I went, how do you possibly do that? So we're really, really happy to see the funding increases. Thank you.
Thank you.
Suzanne, do you want to?
My name is Suzanne Curtin. I live at 24 Merrimack Street. I am a major fan of the LRTA. I have only had one car in my life, and I'm very dependent on public transportation. I moved here from Juneau, Alaska a year and a half ago, and the bus system was very, very important to me, and it's been phenomenal. I also want to give a big shout out to your drivers, and I hope in the training they train the new drivers to be as personable and friendly. They have such a tough job, and they are terrific, greeting people as they get on and off, and I'm just dazzled. So, that's for George. Yes, so thank you for that. I would love to see, because I'm new, I'm a member of 350, I have no idea about the politics of city government, but how you establish a channel of communication between the City Council and the LRTA. I don't know who works that out, but if somebody could, that would be wonderful. And I don't know.
Well, the administrative office works very closely with the manager and the assistant managers.
Okay.
So there is a very close relationship that the LRTA has with the city that I think it works out very well for the both of us.
Okay.
If there are any issues, the assistant city manager, Machado, is on the phone immediately to either George or myself to address whatever issues there are. And I do often speak with the city manager on capital issues and operating issues. So,
Okay, so that's in place and that's going well.
We've got a very good relationship.
And so the money, I know we wanted transparency. I say we, that's 350.org. So the transparency about the money, how is that? Where will that be reflected? Or how?
Yeah, just to the manager, but to the community. In our operating budget, it's posted on our website. Our audits are posted on our website.
We had a question about that 7 million that we
Sure.
asked last year, and you're here now because we asked that question then. It's taken this long to get this answer. That's kind of a long time.
Yeah.
And the community of Lowell is part of this decision, as you yourself said, about electrification, how it happens. So don't you think it's better to kind of be more forthcoming about what's going on and your plan?
Sure. We're working on our plan. We don't have an established plan at this point.
I know, but you need input to help that. You need
Right.
input from the community.
Yeah. No, and I appreciate it. And going forward, I'm glad that I'm meeting a few of the players here today, because going forward, you may be in our group of people that we talk to about this. Whether it be through us or through the Commonwealth, because the Commonwealth, MassDOT, has some consultants that's working on this. And it's a very good point, well taken. And I'm glad that there is this support that is out there in the community. So, and I think it would be nice, so you see the things that we're dealing with in trying to right-size the fleet. You know, instead of just thinking, hey, it should be easy, it'll be good to get some feedback and to bounce things off of not only you, but there are many others that I'm sure would want to have some input as well.
Well, if there's
I
anything,
appreciate the comment.
thank you for being here. If there's anything that we as a transportation subcommittee can do to help foster those conversations, whether it's more meetings like this or something out in the community, please feel free to reach out. I would love to, be involved in those discussions, whether it's meeting with community groups or discussions like this, neighborhood groups. I think there's a lot of folks who'd like to be at the table and have those discussions. I'm also the city's representative to NEMCOG and the MPO now, and I think where that involves many of the same communities that LRTA reaches out to, there's probably an opportunity there as well for more collaboration and discussions. But I do appreciate you being here tonight. I think we had a lot of good info tonight, and this is a really good conversation. And if you're open to it, I would like to invite you back once we have a final budget from the state, and we can talk about what next year looks like and maybe things beyond that. Councilor Noon.
Just one last comment. As I stated earlier, I'm glad we have these conversations, and we can only build on this conversation better in terms of, what you do and how you can help, our resident, not just in the city of Lowell, but the surrounding city and town that you serve. So thank you again for being here, both of you. And thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Councilor Noon, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
To adjourn, sir.
Councilor Dakota, you want to second that? If not, I'll second it. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you. I'll second it. I know you've got